advocating from an anti-caste perspective for the last 16 years. Here today, topic is Ambedkarite perspective on the new education policy 2020. Without talking time, I would request to Gopi Nargunde sir, please enlightenment to us.
Hello, Jai Bhim everyone. Just give me a minute. I have to adjust
Okay,
a few things. Hello everyone. Jai Bhim to all.
Jai Bhim, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, hello. Jai Bhim. Yeah, so nice talking to you. I met Baksa students in 2018, I think, in Gandhinagar. Now it is a pleasure at least to meet virtually. Thanks again. It has been a dynamic in student organization from the very beginning. I wish the very best to all of you.
Thank you, sir.
And all the Bahujan students over there. The subject, the topic given is very timely and deserves a lot of attention from our part because our futures depend on it. Until now, the great majority of Bahujans have been kept out of higher education, even though they have been gained a certain entry into schooling. Even there, only 30% of students who enter actually schools at primary level or pre-primary level actually pass out from at 10th or 12th level. Only 30%, which means that the Bahujan population among this would be less than 10%. All SC, ST, OBC combined. You can hear me? Is there a problem with the voice?
No, sir. No, sir. It is visible.
Yes. So this new education policy is an old tradition, which was first, an education policy was first formulated in 1968 by the, Kothari Commission, which was constituted in 1965. Actually, it submitted its paper report. It made a lot of commission, and one of its suggestions was to increase the annual spending on education 3% and here up to 1%, I think, of the GDP, not the budget itself, not the union budget. But that has not been reached until now. We have not reached 3%, 2% or less of GDP as compared with countries like China, which spend nearly 20 times what India spends on each child. China spends around 36,000 rupees per child, whereas India spends around 1,080, 40 rupees per child. America spends much more. America lakhs per person. So this is let's look at some facts before we education policy is in schools, and nearly 42% of are right now in private schools. The situation was such that in just 10 years ago, nearly only 25% or so were in private schools. Nearly 37 million students are there in colleges and universities, of which nearly 72% or 75% are in private colleges and universities. So to talk of a national education policy in this context, in this kind of situation, wherein the government holds so very little control over education, how it is accessed, how it is distributed across India, it is a kind of a joke. The temerity of the Modi government to talk of a national education policy where there has been steady, privatization of both at both school and college level, at university level. What are we talking about? The control of the central government, the government over, especially the central government and the state governments have given up a lot of control. Is very, runs in conjunction with very large private players. It doesn't have the Bahujan at heart. It doesn't, it doesn't have the majority at heart. It's not talking about the needs of the majority or the Bahujan. It's basically talking about, the tone of the education policy is very evident in many places. We can see three broad trends in this, policy. A kind of critical elements which inform every step of this policy. The first is centralization. This process started with the 42nd Amendment, in the 70s, wherein the central government also took control of education from the states, giving the states progressively less of a role and control over education. The second element is privatization. Just 10 years ago, most of India's universities, at least 60 to 70% of India's universities were government run. Now the policy is such that more than half are privately run, and most of 72% of the colleges themselves are privately owned. And in the future, this policy envisages the entry of at least 100 top, foreign universities directly. Until now, there was a policy of partnering with foreign universities and all. So around 650 universities and other places of learning in the West have partnered up with various Indian universities and colleges to share faculty and share curriculum to an extent, and have a kind of shared vision. But this is going to actually change in the future, wherein the foreign university, we don't know whether they would be top universities or just partners of B grade or C grade universities, which would come down and set up their shop in India. So these universities, by another 10 years or so, 70 to 80% of universities and will also be private, not just colleges. So the third element is Brahminization and Sanskritization, imposition of certain values which they call constitutional values, but in fact they are what they understand from constitutional values. These values I'll talk about later. They have listed out these values. So this will mean an increasing hold of Brahminical ethos, literature and history and mythology, because they don't have any history. They have basically mythology, which they will pass off as history on Indian education, on Indian pedagogy, right from early school days to university and PhD levels. At PhD levels, they are also bringing in a national research overseeing body, which will oversee whatever research proposals you submit to your university or college, and will see that they fall in line with certain official Hindutva line. So this is already happening because the Modi government has been around for nearly 6 years. So these three elements are the undercurrent in the new education policy. An increasing tendency towards centralization, which means that taking over control of not just schools, but also of state universities and state affiliating universities. Every state has certain big universities which affiliate nearly hundreds of colleges. All these colleges are sought to be brought under certain control of a unitary university, as Professor Sukhdev Thorat talked about last few days ago. This unitary universities will be in certain central places like district centers or state capitals, or in other bigger towns, so that they would be. Until now, the access to colleges had improved somewhat in the last 3 decades. There we are again reverting back to a stage wherein even spatial access would be very limited. All colleges would be under in one space or one campus, so that in this unitary university system, so that less and less affiliating colleges will be there, and less of access to remote areas, villages, small towns, and all for higher education. Therefore, the thinking is almost similar when it comes to school education, but we'll come to that later. So we had to measure this new education policy against Ambedkarite perspective. So what is an Ambedkarite perspective? Baba Sahib wanted a society where these three principles, liberty, equality, and fraternity, are enshrined in every walk of life, and these inform all modes of associated living, democratic living, in all associations and all relationships, in whether secular or religious or wherever. So these three principles are our guidelines, and we have to measure how this new education policy stands up against these Ambedkarite principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity. First thing is, of course, liberty. Liberty, of course, our constitution also lays down the principle of right to education, and it has been bolstered by an actual act which was brought in 10 years ago, the Right to Education Act, which was supposed to expand access to education for marginalized students, SC, ST, OBC students basically, and what they call economically backward students in villages and towns, but it has basically been another name for Savarna quota. Very few have actually gotten, and especially in large private schools and big schools in cities. So this liberty, which is enshrined in the constitution, directive principles, and also in the law, as the right to education, it is getting more and more limited because, as I pointed out earlier, nearly 40 to 50% of Bahujan students drop out before class 8th and class 10th. So what we have is only very few students coming out from this section. Only 19% of SCs graduate 10th or 12th, and ST is even less than 10%. So the number of these students actually reaching colleges would be much less. We can look at the basic figures of number of students in school and number of students in universities to understand this problem. There are nearly 23 to 25 crore students in schools across India, as I pointed out earlier. So, but the number of students in colleges is around 3.74 crores, which means that the number of students are around one is the number of student in college, or one is the number of students in schools. But they would be naturally, because the school is a longer period, it's 10 to 12 years or 15 years sometimes, and the university is 6 to 10 years. So we can expect a certain lower number of students in universities, which should be one third of students. The number could be the same as one third the number of students studying in school in colleges. Which means that if there are 23 or 25 crore students in schools, there should be at least 7 or 8 crore students in colleges. But that isn't the case. It's less than half of that figure. It's only 3.75 crores. So out of this, 90% of all Brahmin Savarna students are Brahmin upper caste students actually graduate from school. Their dropout rate is much lower. Therefore, nearly 2.5 to 3 crore students in universities could be Brahmin Savarna. So our universities are basically meant to cater to these sections. The Bahujans are only entering now, more vigorously since the last 10 years. But the plain fact remains that higher education in India is basically a Brahmin upper caste affair, and 2/3 of the time. So, does this new education policy seek to respect the right to education of the Bahujan students, give them the liberty to study higher? No, it doesn't. It actually speaks of constraining their access to universities by bringing in this unitary universities concept. By bringing in other key concepts which I'll talk about a little bit. So I see severe constraints being imposed again on the liberty or the freedom of attaining higher education by the Bahujans. The second principle, of course, is equality. Equality has been a low joke in India right from the very beginning when it comes to education policy. When the first IITs were started in 1950s and the IIMs were started in 60s, 70s, and all kinds of other central universities were started in this very early years. India's schooling deficiency in number of schools were nearly 80 to 90%. And nearly 90% of SC, ST, OBC students in until 1960s or so, until 1970s in fact, and very little access to good schools or even government schools which went beyond middle school or primary school. So from the very beginning, it has been a lopsided figure where 89% to 88% of Bahujans live rural India. The access to schools is still very limited, and it is getting still more constrained because of the entry of private schools there. Now nearly 40% of even urban students are going to private schools, more than half actually, not 40% in the last 10 years. The number has increased in rural areas also. So it is being imposed, the notion of private as a quality education, private as the only education, because quality education then becomes only education. If people, children, parents lose interest in government schools, they close down. And the private schools become the monopoly in these rural areas. In the cities too, we notice a lot of different variety of schools from IB International, those schools offering international baccalaureate certificates or diplomas, which means they are international schools. There are 35 different varieties of schools in India, according to Dr. Balchandra Mungekar, who observed this in Parliament a few years ago. If there are 35 different varieties of school, and among government schools itself, there are panchayat schools, municipal schools, Jilla Parishad schools, Kendriya Vidyalaya, army schools, railway schools, automatic these schools. All the central government institutions have their own kind of schools, and the state governments have their own kind of schools. So there are 35 different varieties. Now they must be, if it was 35 different varieties 10 years ago, it must be nearly 40, 45 different varieties now. So the access is going more and more. There is more and more differentiation. There is no question of equality. No question of equality whatsoever in what kind of schools children go to and what kind of education they get, or the pedagogy itself is different. There is ICSE, there is CBSE, and there is IB schools, as we talked about, and there are state boards, and all these schools are already there. But the tendency is more and more to nudge children of all demographics, from poor SC, ST, OBC children to richer kids, towards private schools. It has become a norm because the government itself has given up, even though it says right to education is a fundamental right. In a way, it is pushing more and more people towards private schools by deploying less and less attention on government schools and on recruitment of teachers. Right now, probably 25 to 30 lakhs teachers are needed in government schools across India. But the government, the union government and the state government look away all the time. This is a problem they have been ignoring for the last 2 decades. So and there is a question of motivating teachers to stick to rural schools, which they are not doing. There is a question of corrupt and bad administration in rural schools and government schools in general, which makes more students drop out. So there is not enough willingness on the part of the government. It doesn't like to continue with the government school systems in a way. That's why it's pushing people away. And the World Bank and other world agencies, even and corporates in education from across the world, they have been seeing an opportunity in this, deficiencies of the Indian government in, fulfilling its promise of, right to education. They are stepping in gradually. Since the year 2000, the World Bank has been investing billions of dollars in Indian education to motivate the government to move more and more towards what it calls choices in education, towards creating choices in education. There in America they've brought in the policy of vouchers and what is called a school choice, wherein instead of setting up schools and asking kids to go there, or welcome them there, public schools, I mean. The government gives vouchers to parents so that they can pick and choose schools, private or public schools their children can go to, or they want their children to go to. So the World Bank and international civil society organizations which work to promote certain libertarian ideas in education, calling education itself a market. They have been trying to force this, policies, steadily but forcefully down the throat of the union government and the state government for the last 2 decades, and they are succeeding to a large extent. The right to education, 25% quota for poor children in private schools is a result of that policy, wherein the idea was not to give 25% seats to poor children. The idea was more to promote, legitimize the existence of private schools. As long as private schools exist, there can't be any equality in education or equality in access, and there can't be any equality wherein, equal education where the Bahujans would feel socially as confident as upper caste students. So private schools, instead of becoming a problem, they have been turned into a kind of solution. This is the way the also dynamics around the promoters of capitalism or the market in education, the experts in civil society, and a lot of activists and government politicians have worked towards deprioritizing the role of government in education, especially in schools. So this is also, gradually will naturally reflect in higher education, wherein, excuse me, excellent. Yeah. Right. Can you hear me? Hello. Pradhani. Okay. Right. Yeah. So this promotion of hello.
हाँ सर, हेलो सर. हेलो सर. क्या हुआ? नेट चला क्या?
Yeah, shall I continue?
Okay, sir.
Yeah, can I continue? Yes, thank you. So this, role played by the World Bank and all the, civil society organizations, think tanks, and NGOs in promoting, right to education as a career of more privatization in India, rather than, increasing access to poor children and Bahujan children. This should be this should be seen as a part of a long-going policy of increasing central control, increasing privatization in education, and increasing what we have come to now, Hinduization or Brahminization or Sanskritization of schools in the name of values and all. The normative subject of Indian education system policy is basically the upper caste Hindu, the Brahmin. So he wants to deploy all resources towards, whether in higher education in universities or in technical education in IITs, or in management education, or in schools, basically, towards ensuring that more and more resources are employed towards educating this minority of upper caste and Brahmin students, and giving only false promises of right to education and of universal education, of inclusive education, etc. to the Bahujans. Because the fact remains that nearly 70 to, as I pointed out, 70 to 75% of higher education seats right now are occupied by upper caste. I mean, this could be a lower estimate because the All India State of Higher Education report doesn't give you a complete picture of all the student composition. Nor does the government conduct any caste census, which gives you clear pictures of what is the participation of each caste category or caste in this education arena. So this tend towards centralization, privatization, and Sanskritization. Actually, that's some construction going on in the neighborhood. I can't do anything about that. So this tendency had started long ago from the very beginning in the Nehru era itself, as which constituted the Kothari Commission, but it never paid any full attention to the Kothari Commission's recommendations. Then there was the next commission in 1986, which was also not paid much attention, because it was making the same recommendation of allocating more funds for education, nearly 3% of the GDP, but that never happened. And then there is this policy now, and there has been a policy, even though it might seem that the number of colleges and universities have increased, and the number of students in universities like yours, central universities, etc., has of Bahujan students has also increased. The point is that these students are becoming less and less in number because of the increased emphasis on private universities and colleges. So these will be the majority in the future. Your number, with all the limitations on scholarships and all the pains you have to go through in the reservation process, admission process, and later in the scholarship process and the fellowship process, and then in getting into retaining your hostel and other facility, access to all these facilities. I keep seeing them, a large percentage of significant portion of writings in a certain section of Roundtable India is about the problems students face in accessing these services in universities where they have got admission. So the emphasis as it is on expansion, but without the Bahujan. Now there are 993 universities, nearly only 350 to 400 are government universities. The majority are colleges and universities which are privately run, and as it is, nearly 68% or 70% of students are going to these private universities and colleges. This percentage will increase in the next 10 years because more foreign universities will directly come in here, and there are a lot of proposals in every state for private universities. The highest number being in Rajasthan, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, all these Hindi-speaking state which have such decimal records in school education, etc., are hosting more private universities because the the entrenched dominant caste in this area want more private education without any hassles of going through, facing any reservations as such, or any government in any government run institution. So the emphasis will more and more shift towards this private universities, where the upper caste will be more fully at home, more comfortable. So, as the upper caste moving away from government institutions, as we have witnessed this since the 80s, when the upper caste in villages moved away from the panchayat schools, the government lost interest in panchayat schools, and now only SC/ST OBC students are there in rural schools. So it pays less and less attention. When the government schools were run, had upper caste students in significant numbers, all the local politicians, the sarpanch to MLA, the revenue officials, the education officials would pay constant attention, and they would run well. And many of these students went on to IITs and higher education in universities in India, abroad, and wherever. So they were run well as long as the upper caste students were there. But since the 80s, the upper caste students' numbers has come down in government schools in rural areas. The standards of administration, even though the funds have not been shortchanged, the attention of the government is less and less, and of the political class is less and less focused on rural schools. So they think it's a headache. Let the all school go private. They'll let there be a monopoly of private schools. We have to understand this political thinking. So this new document reflects more of that kind of thinking. Because it talks more in terms of euphemisms, in terms of vague, golden principles and all. But it is not doesn't explain how it is going to expand this access, how it is going to correct this government schools. It only talks of bringing in more quality, more whatever. They don't understand that without any proper administration, the quality and etc. doesn't mean anything. The principles don't mean anything on paper. So this restricts the third point principle of Ambedkar, which was fraternity. There are only ST, OBC students in government school, and all upper caste students are in private schools. So what kind of social endosmosis are we talking about? And in the future, there will only be private universities, and SC/ST, OBC students will only be in government universities, mostly state-run universities. What kind of social endosmosis is possible? What kind of fraternity is possible in the larger society when we grow up and go to these kind of different institutions and have different kind of resources, and different kind of attention being paid by the state. So this is a broad policy which goes away further and further away from Ambedkarite principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity. There are certain values they keep talking about, throughout this document of bringing in. Let me read out a few paras. The emphasis, as I said, more and more since the general principle of Indian education has shifted more and more towards what we call premier, elite, central, prestigious, competitive, best, top university. It's not about equal and equitable education. So this new education policy is again a step in that promoting hierarchy and inequality by not just justifying inequality, it is glorifying inequality by always talking about this hierarchy, about quality, about best, about top. There is no broad-based egalitarian thinking underlining this policy, or any such policy since very long. No, look at some of the values that the and the ethos that the new education policy wants to bring in. It talks of, I'm quoting, the rich heritage of ancient and eternal Indian knowledge and thought has been a guiding light for this policy. The pursuit of knowledge, gyan, wisdom, pragya, and truth, satya. It's not the Buddhist pragya, was always considered an Indian thought and philosophy as the highest human goal. The aim of education in ancient India was not just the acquisition of knowledge as preparation for life in this world, a life beyond schooling, but for the complete realization and liberation of the self. World-class institutions of ancient India such as Takshashila, Nalanda, Bakramshila, Vallabhi, etc. So they are talking about this ancient Gyan, Pragya, and Satya. So all these are not understood from the Buddhist point of view, but these are as understood from the Brahmanic point of view. So and they talk of great scholars historically, such Indian education system is supposed to have produced. The Indian education system produced great scholars such as Charaka, Sushruta, Aryabhatta, Varahamihira, Bhaskaracharya, Brahmagupta, Chanakya, Chakrapani Datta, Madhava, Panini, Patanjali, Nagarjuna, Gautama, Pingala, Shankardev, Maitreyi, Gargi, and Tiruvalvara. So they have included Tiruvalvara in this list. Can you spot a single Bahujan among all these groups? All these people who work to produce, thousands of varieties of wheat and rice in India, who work to produce all these big temples and, in Khajuraho, in Chidambaram, and structures like Taj Mahal and Charminar. Where are the Bahujans who built all these institutions? Where are the Bahujans who built Indian Parliament, Rashtrapati Bhavan, and all this? No, and do they have no heritage as such? How did they build these institutions? So the emphasis is basically on Brahmanic knowledge and on Brahmins specifically as teachers. So this is supposed to be the ancient heritage of India. Agon. They talk about the next is the I'm quoting again, the teacher must be at the center of the fundamental reforms in the education system. The new education policy must help re-establish teachers at all levels as the most respected and essential members of our society, because they truly shape our next generation of citizens. And blah blah. So this, from where the need is for expanding access to students, they want to bring back the teacher as a guru, and the guru is, of course, naturally, this is shorthand for the Brahmin teacher. So this is, this is the kind of history they want to recreate. The Brahmin as the guru, and school, university as the guru. And then they talk about, Sanskrit also specifically. I don't know how many of you know, but after Hindi, Sanskrit is the language which is given the most funds by the Union government and the central government. There are nearly 11 universities dedicated to Sanskrit study, a language which is dead. So we are already immersed in a certain kind of hierarchical education system. The new education system, honestly says we are going to promote this ancient so-called values and this ancient Sanskriti and this ancient language called dead language called Sanskrit. So where does the Bahujan where will he get a feeling of some cherishing some fraternity in these institutions where Sanskrit will be held in such high regard, and all ancient values will be held in such high regard, and they want to impose this Sanskritic knowledge and language right from school childhood. In North India, they already have Sanskrit in lots of schools, a majority of schools, I think. So what is the change? What is the progressive about this new education policy? In what way does it concern itself with the Bahujans? In what way does it address the principles or guidelines of liberty, equality, and fraternity? It is very difficult for me to, it doesn't seem a new document in many ways. It seems only a continuation of all the policies since, the very beginning, since the 50s. So they talk about, look at this, knowledge of India will include knowledge from ancient India and its contributions to modern India and its successes and challenges. What is this knowledge from ancient India? They'll again talk about yoga. They'll again talk about Ayurveda, which is, appropriated knowledge of the Bahujans and Adivasis in medicine and other fields. Now they give it Sanskrit names and they call it all kinds of Brahminic stuff. What is this ancient knowledge system of India? So we are regressing, and the last point is that the values that they want to teach you, they're talking about of infusing right from early schooling years, is that this what they call constitutional values. Look at the chicanery of these people. Look at their levels of deception. They call their own values, their own Sanghi values, as constitutional values and pass them off to us as a new education policy. Look at the values listed: Seva, Ahimsa, Swachhata, Satya, Nishkama Karma, Shanti, sacrifice, tolerance, diversity, pluralism, righteous conduct, and all that. But look at Seva, Ahimsa, Swachhata, Satya, Karma, Shanti. All these, Gandhian seeming values and Nishkama Karma, like, Modi says somewhere, the scamming community must, cherish the job of, cleaning human excreta and not ask for any returns. That is Nishkama Karma. Seva, the duty of the Bahujan is to serve the upper caste and then not expect any, fruits. This is their ideal, which they want to promote right from schooling days. In early schooling, they are saying Balavatika. They are going to replace Anganwadis with what they call Balavatika. Don't know whether they will serve eggs and any non-vegetarian stuff to children there. But they will serve Sanskrit and other knowledge to our children. So this is a step. This is a policy which doesn't have the Bahujan access, even on the fringes of its vision. The Brahmin Savarna is always the normative subject to them. All the focus goes to Brahmin Savarna's needs and what they feel, because of all the incursions made through the reservation policy into government institutions. They are expanding private Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kofir sir. On behalf of Bafsa Siuji, we are very grateful to you, sir. After listening your lecture, I think people will get more knowledge. Thank you so much, sir. Sir, we have one query, not a question. Government has implemented number of policy, especially education sector, which is most important. Our icon like Jyotiba Phule, Savitribai Phule, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, already they have focused to education, and education is the most important, and without education nobody can empowerment or upliftment, for their better life. So in this, if we overlook to the situation of rural area, their marginalized section people, masses are, they're not eligible to get private education because their economic condition is very pathetic. So in this situation, whether they will be able to overlook towards their livelihood, yeah, private education. In this situation, what is your opinion, sir? Please suggest. हेलो सर, सर आवाज नहीं आ रहा सर. टेक्निकल प्रॉब्लम, sir. There is some technical problem, so please sir repetition that answer.
Can you hear me now?
Okay, sir. Yes sir. Yes.
Achha, did you hear the whole part of my talk earlier until I finished?
Yes sir.
Achha, I said thank you and Jai Bhim, I hope you heard it because I hope it didn't go missing. Anyway, your question about primary school and children in rural areas and not getting access and forget about them accessing private schools.
Yes.
Let me repeat myself. Right from the world bodies, like the UN to WHO, they have laid down this as almost a rule that primary education is a universal human right. It's not something which can be ignored by anyone. It's the responsibility of every state, any state which has to provide primary education to every child, no matter what the cost and where the child is or whatever. There are some schools even in India where there is only one child and still the teachers go there and the school has to be maintained at some cost. But the government, I am trying to say, is giving up this right also, this responsibility, by increasingly pushing children towards private schools, which means that essentially Bahujan children will be able to access it less and less. This was the gist of my talk also. Then moving certain condition things toward these conditions, a certain situation wherein all government schools will be closed down and only access to education children will have is private schools. So one of the key points which we should of this education policy also, it's a continuation of old education policies, whether written or not, of all state government and central government, that they want to give up responsibility over schooling and education. They will give some money to the children like they are doing in Andhra, so that their parents could send them to whatever school they want. So this is the tendency which is since 2000, the year 2000 started giving money to Indian government and state government so that they can start a program called school vouchers or school choice. They'll give a certain amount of money regularly every month to the parents of children so that they can send them to private schools. The point is, private schools don't have the responsibility to educate our children. They have the responsibility towards their shareholders to make money, to make profits. Nowhere in the world can the private school provide universal education to all people, whether it is in the US or all across Europe. It is the governments which provide primary education, schooling to all children. So we have a government which is now formally declaring that you can have more and more privatization. So this is a danger I am warning against. This is going to even worsen. So please understand that as students, come to this stage, understand that this is a grave danger, especially if there are no schools for Bahujan children. How will they come to universities in the future? There will be less and less.
Yes, sir. Okay, sir. Fine. Thank you so much, sir. Once again for in this talk.
Thank you all, Pradhani, and I forgot the name, Suranjan and all. And, hope to.
Okay, sir. Next.
Thank you all. Jai Hind. Wish you the very
Jai
best.
Hind, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Jai Hind.